Chapter 7. Allies in Ashes. Azural pushed through the forest, her steps unyielding, each stride driving her forward, as the memory of Vuva's whisper echoed in her mind. His voice haunted her, clinging to her resolve like a dark shadow. She clenched her fists, feeling the familiar heat flicker beneath her skin, a reminder of her purpose. She would not let him control her again. She was no longer his to wield or destroy, but his message was clear. He was watching, waiting, and she had to act before he struck. Talvar and Soraya moved in silence beside her, each marked by their own vigilance. Talvar's hand hovered near his sword, his eyes scanning the dense forest, while Soraya walked with her head high, seemingly undisturbed by the shadows that crept along the path. Finally, Talvar broke the silence, his voice barely a whisper. "Soraya, you mentioned others who might stand against Vuva, people with enough reason to fight him. Do you know where to find them?" Soraya nodded, her gaze distant. "I know places where his darkness has left scars, villages that have felt his reach, families broken by his curse, people who would fight if given a reason." Azural's gaze hardened. "Then we find these places and give them that reason." But Talvar looked doubtful. "Not everyone will want to fight. He's twisted loyalty with fear before, making allies out of enemies. We may find resistance instead of support." Soraya met his gaze, calm but firm. Fear is his greatest weapon, but anger can turn fear into resolve, and some have nothing left to lose. They trekked through the forest until it opened up to reveal a small village nestled within a hollow. It was eerily quiet, cottages lined up in neat rows, their roofs bowed with age and wear. Smoke drifted from a few chimneys, thin and ghostly. Azural felt a heaviness in the air, a bitter tension that clung to the village like fog. "Something's wrong here," Talvar murmured, his gaze narrowing. "It feels hollow." Soraya nodded, her expression somber. "Vuva has touched this place. You can feel it in the air." They entered cautiously, and as they stepped into the village, wary faces peered from behind doors, watching with suspicion and fear. Azural felt her fire stir within her, ready for battle, but she kept her hands at her sides. They needed information, not a fight. An older woman, her eyes shadowed and lined with worry, emerged from her cottage, meeting their gaze with a hesitant defiance. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "Why come to a place forgotten by the world?" Azural stepped forward, her voice steady. "We're here for those who've suffered under Vuva's shadow, people willing to fight him." The woman's eyes widened, a flicker of anger flaring behind her fear. "We've all felt his shadow," she replied, bitterness coating her words. "Vuva's followers took my son, took many sons, many daughters, left us hollowed out, afraid, with nothing but grief." A murmur rose as others gathered, drawn by the woman's defiance. They wore expressions of fear, anger, and desperation. Azural could feel their pain, raw and simmering like embers in a dying fire. Talvar stepped forward, his voice calm but strong. "If you've lost people to Vuva, you don't have to stay powerless. We plan to end his rule, but we need allies. Those who know the stakes, who have a reason to stand against him. Join us, and there may yet be justice for those you lost." The villagers shifted, their expressions wavering between disbelief and reluctant hope. One man, tall and broad-shouldered, stepped forward, his face etched with grief. "You speak of justice, but who are you to fight Vuva? He will find you, and he will destroy you." Azural's gaze hardened, her hands curling into fists. "I've faced him before, and survived. I rose from the ashes because of him. He's powerful, but he's not invincible. I will destroy him, or die trying. You can stand with me, or you can let him take more from you." The man hesitated, a silence falling over the gathering. But then he nodded, stepping forward with grim determination. "If you can bring him down, I'll fight. I've already lost everything he could take." One by one others murmured their agreement, some more hesitant than others. Slowly they stepped forward, offering their support, their faces etched with an anger that had smoldered too long. It was a fragile hope, but Azural knew that even a fragile spark could grow into a blaze. Soraya's voice broke through the murmurs, calm and steady. "You will not face him alone. There are other villages like this one, other people who will stand if they know they're not alone." As the villagers dispersed, a feeling of purpose settled over the group. Azural felt her resolve sharpen, her fire simmering in anticipation. With each ally they gained, Viuva's shadow felt a little thinner, his power a little less absolute. He may have been watching, but he would not see them cower. Talvar stepped beside her, his gaze steady. "You've given them something to fight for," he said, a hint of admiration in his voice. "Viuva has sown fear, but you've shown them what that fear can become." Azural's gaze was fierce, her fire burning brightly in her veins. "Viuva thinks he can control everything with shadows and fear, but I am not afraid." She glanced at Soraya, a slight smirk tugging at her lips. "And he should fear my flames." They left the village at dusk, a dozen villagers joining them, armed with whatever they could find. The air was thick with tension, but Azural felt an unusual steadiness. These people were here because of what they'd lost, but also because of what they hoped to regain. Night closed in as they travelled deeper, and when they finally stopped to rest, Azural found herself staring into the dark, the memory of Viuva's smile and his taunting words playing in her mind. She knew he would strike again soon. She could feel it, like a storm building on the horizon, but she would be ready. As they settled around a small fire, Soraya's thoughtful gaze met Azural's. "You have something he never expected," she murmured. "People who believe in you, allies who would stand by you. He'll see it as weakness, but it's anything but." Azural looked around at her gathered allies, feeling the weight of their presence like a shield. She was still wary, still carrying her doubts, but with each ally they gained, Viuva's darkness seemed a little more distant, his power a little less absolute. She clenched her fists, feeling the fire steady within her, familiar and fierce. They would continue, they would gather strength, and they would face Viuva's shadow until it fell. Because her fire was no longer just her own, and as they prepared to move on, she knew that no matter the cost, she would see his shadows consumed by her flame.